Well, good morning, everybody. It's Easter morning. He has risen indeed. I originally wanted to do this video upstairs. I thought it would be nice to sit next to the communion table with this stained glass next to me, but it turns out it's very heavy and very fragile, so I'm not going to be carrying it up the stairs myself. Anyway. Scripture passage for today is John chapter 20, verses 1 to 18. So if you're in the NIV, that's the empty tomb. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. You can read that in your home Bible, or you can read it at the Bible Gateway link below. I'll let you pause the video to do that now. So the resurrection, we finally get to say he's risen, and we finally get to talk about what that means. We left yesterday on waiting and the unexpected surprise of what actually happens. But really we left off on Good Friday, where we were talking about how sacrifice and setting ourselves aside is what can lead to what God's really doing. And Jesus modeled that when he went to the cross. By going to the cross and going willingly, he exposed the injustice that led to him being there without contributing to it. It's a model that works, that history has proven, and that it could stand on its own 2 feet. The problem with Good Friday alone is simply that it would assume that we are strong enough to follow in Jesus' footsteps, when the story is all about how we're weak enough, and our weaknesses and fears and all that led to Jesus being there in the first place. Good Friday is all about recognizing our limitations and our weaknesses and what they can combine to do. And so you can't expect people to go to the cross while also saying they're too weak to set themselves aside. That's what Easter Sunday is about. Easter Sunday says that we can sacrifice ourselves for greater good. We can by setting ourselves aside and letting God work. It may harm us, but God will do something in the long term. God is working, will use our sacrifice to build something better. And even, and I think we need this assurance. Even if we pay the ultimate sacrifice, it's saying that we will get to, God is bigger than death. There's more to life than death. From our perspective, one day we will close our eyes and we won't open them again. From the resurrection's perspective, it's saying that's, even though that's all we can see, that is not all that's happening. And that should give us the strength to be able to go out and set ourselves aside and do what we need to do. To live out God's plan and bring God's peace and justice. A lot of people like to talk about, and every Easter I make a point to talk about this, but a lot of people like to argue about whether the resurrection happened or not. And that's a hang-up for a lot of people. And I always like to say that I don't think that is a useful argument. The resurrection is meant to be something that makes people take notice. I think God probably could have shown us a similar message through different things, but the resurrection is something that doesn't happen. It's something that defies the laws of physics. Even in those days, it just didn't happen. And so it's meant to be hard to believe. It's meant to make us sit up and take notice. The other side of it, though, is that there's no historical proof. Science says things don't live again. Once things die, that's it. That's what science tells us. And on top of that, there's no historical record. There's nothing proving that Jesus even existed. there's nothing proving that he died and was resurrected. We have the Bible, but they were writing years after the fact, and there's nothing corroborating it. This is written from a biased perspective. From an academic perspective, there's nothing saying that Jesus' followers didn't concoct this whole thing. I don't believe that, but there's no hard evidence to the contrary. If you're going to believe this, you have to just believe it. So it's not from a non-Christian perspective arguing against the resurrection. It's just dividing, and from a Christian perspective arguing for the resurrection, it's just gatekeeping. Neither of those are true to the actual point of the story, which is that it's meant to be assurance that good can prevail over evil, and that even though we have limitations, we can be part of that solution, and we can experience that solution. Regardless of what you come to with the resurrection story, I hope that the message that you take away is that good is possible, justice is possible. It is, if we set ourselves aside, then it is just, if we set ourselves aside, it is not in vain. If we set ourselves aside and we pay the ultimate sacrifice, or any sacrifice, ultimately justice will be realized. Easter Sunday is supposed to give us the strength to just confidently move forward, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so for Easter, I know this is very difficult times, but for Easter, I hope that the message you take away is simply that things can be tough. Sometimes we have to sacrifice. And walking to our cross is a much healthier thing as a whole than fighting for our cause. Setting ourselves aside is possible, and it's important. And I hope the message today gives you the strength to be able to do that, regardless of the lack of assurance that we have as human beings. Amen.